KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to KNON.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.
Jim Schutze here with Get Off My... Wait a minute. I'm not Jim Schutze. Where's Jim? That's not his music. He must have taken the music, run off for the weekend, gone fishing. Maybe he's in a bunker under Mike Miles' house. Where the heck is he? Well, looks like you're stuck with me, Eric Celeste, city columnist for D Magazine. Been co-hosting with Jim the last few weeks. Jim is out this week. We'll try to keep things together while he's gone. And he did apparently lock the doors where we couldn't get to his music this week, which is so Jim Schutze. It's so Dallas Observer.
If he can't have it, nobody will.
Right. That voice, by the way, is my guest this week, Patrick Kennedy.
Howdy.
How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you, Eric?
Doing well. Patrick might be more well known to some of you folks as Walkable DFW, if you follow him on Twitter, or if you know his website, which is Car Free in Big D.
Also Walkable DFW.
Also Walkable DFW gets you there. Patrick is, known Patrick a while, besides being a loyal Tottenham Hotspur fan.
Yes, sir.
Come on, you Spurs. He also is an urban planner, somebody who thinks a lot about issues that I find fascinating, having to do with urban development, urban planning, sort of the direction cities are going and trying to become better places to live, less dependent on old transportation ideas, and someone who thinks a lot about those issues, but also is working to help change Dallas to become a less car-dependent, more interesting urban city. Is that fair?
That is fair. Yes.
Okay. So, Patrick, we've got some things that you've been very involved with in the news. We're going to get to those in a little bit, but I want to give the folks listening a sense of who you are, how you came to Dallas, and how these issues came to the fore for you. So tell us a little bit about when you came to Dallas and how you got involved in starting your website, Walkable DFW.
Mm-hmm. Well, I moved here in 2002, fresh out of school in Pennsylvania, and I wanted to get away from the cold, right? So I was headed south, and I also knew I wanted to be in the middle of a sprawling city because I felt there would be the most opportunity to be a part of change.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, formerly known before Detroit as one of the more famous Chapter 9 bankrupt cities in the country.
Right.
So that's always a something I follow, is whether cities are going bankrupt or not. But I moved here fresh out of school and started working at RTKL, which is an international architecture firm. And
in the Republic Tower, right?
Yes, where you live.
Where I live, right, downtown.
And then I guess in the midst of the recession, we weren't as busy. So I started the blog on the side to talk about just general, walkable issues, look at other cities, and just have a little bit of fun with it. So I guess I was a little bored at times at work.
Let's stop there. Talk about what the idea of a walkable city is for folks who might not know what they mean by that. What does walkability mean?
I think at its very core, it's things that are close enough to you that you have the choice to get to where you work, where you shop, restaurants and whatnot, without the car, if you so choose. And it's not you're not taking your life into your own hands and playing Frogger, trying to get to those destinations. So I think if you think about any city that you've loved visiting, you're probably talking about a walkable city.
San Francisco, New York, these sort of places where when you visit, you don't have to worry about renting a car.
Yeah, you don't need to rent a car. Yeah,
right. And Dallas is certainly not one of those places.
Yeah, actually, when you start looking at the statistics, Dallas and Detroit, in terms of metropolitan areas, have the highest rates of car dependence, which is people commuting by private automobile. And I think that is a sign that it's not that we love our cars, but that we're more dependent on them. And if we love them, it's more of a Stockholm syndrome, where we love them because we're dependent on them. We're captive to them.
So you started the website, started in social media this persona of walkable DFW. You were somebody who tried to, even in a city that makes it difficult, right? You tried to, as much as possible, live that life and write about the life of somebody who is an urban and tries to use public transportation or walking when you possibly could, right?
Yeah, it all started as a fun little experiment that I got rid of my car. Actually wrecked it and totaled it and took the insurance, and rather than buy a new car with the insurance, I moved downtown into a loft and furnished the loft with the insurance money and decided, hey, let's write about me trying to live without a car in Dallas. And that just sort of grew into something bigger, which was less about me and more about just sort of the city and various developments around the city.
So because of that, did you start sort of plugging in then to this effort? Because it seems like this sort of effort has really taken hold in cities around the country, the smart city, smart growth effort that if you can read about happening in a lot of cities, more connectivity, more of an ability to walk to places in your own neighborhood to do the daily things you need to do, right?
Yeah, and I think that's coming about almost economically, both from public sector side, in terms of the ability to pay for and maintain infrastructure, as well as just the private side, the individual finding that between gas prices and maintaining and owning however many cars that you need in your household, that is just becoming too expensive and wasteful. And I mean, I calculated when I first got rid of my car that I was saving about $6,600 a year by not having that and just getting around by car and by DART and whatnot. So it allowed me to get a nicer place.
And for folks who don't take public transportation often here, is it fair to say Dallas has a bad reputation, and is it a deserved reputation for its public transportation network?
I wouldn't say it deserves a bad reputation. I think it deserves a lot of commendation for how big and extensive the network is, particularly for how big and sprawling the city is. And it's not built for transit, yet we still have made the investment,
right,
which is pretty good. And I've found that it is far better, and DART has come a long way too in terms of modernizing technology. Like I use Google Maps and whatnot to say, hey, how can I get to this certain place? And they'll say, well, you just take this bus at this time, and that gets me there. I mean, before I used to find that the bus system was so convoluted just because there's not really a route predictability. But now with just the maps tells you where to go and when to go.
I just started working. My day job is at a science and medicine magazine at Legacy Center, way up in Plano, right? And we, with my girlfriend, we share one car, so it's sometimes difficult to drive, and I don't want to make that drive if I don't have to.
Yeah, as do I and my girlfriend. We share one car.
So, and what I really didn't want to do, though, was take 5 buses, and it takes 2 hours, and this is what you assume. And I was at the job about 2 weeks, and my boss said, by the way, have you got on Google Maps and just plugged in this route, your house to here, and hit public transportation on the left-hand side? And I said, no, I just assumed. Well, she did. There is a bus that I now take often that I pick up outside my door. I'm 8 feet from my front door, the 208, and it makes 2 more stops downtown and then gets on the highway, exits at my exit, the exit before Legacy, and stops before the park and ride 1/3 of a mile from my office. Had no idea. So now, for $250 each way, which is basically the tolls I'm paying, with a lot less of the whole of carbon footprint, et cetera, and every 15 minutes a new bus coming, I walk outside, I check my phone, it tells me when the next bus is going to be there, and I jump on. That DART had gotten to that point, I had no idea.
Yeah, and they're experimenting with going ticketless, so you can just use your phone on buses and trains. So that's helpful because there's not really a place to get tickets for buses for the most part.
Right.
You office at Shops of Legacy?
Just this 6900 there, just south of them. So yeah, it's a ways.
But it's also one of the premier walkable suburban developments probably in the entire country.
Well, and that's where I have sort of for years on the D blog made jokes about the suburbs and hit them for being drains on the city, but they're getting a lot smarter, aren't they?
They have to.
Plano downtown, where you can exit on the DART rail, is a great little area now, with lots of interesting shops and restaurants. Like you said, Legacy Center. Why is it that they have to?
They know that they compete with each other for residents as well as businesses, and so the competition is really to be the most desirable. Their schools play into that as well, but I think if you have walkable, interesting areas, that's going to allow suburbs to exist long into the future when transportation does start to take its toll, become more expensive both for cities to maintain as well as people who don't want to spend so much on transportation.
And I really see with young people, and I say young people meaning anyone younger than me, and I'm
how old is that?
Blah, blah, blah. So I'm 45, but and you're very young.
I'm 34.
34. So I really see it with generation after me, my daughter who's 19 and her generation. These are people who are coming up with an expectation, aren't they, that cities need to make available to them these transportation options, or we won't live there.
Right. What we call the millennial generation, which is about 18 to 35-year-olds.
Right. And because unlike me, I just sort of accepted my generation, well, I have to buy a car, and I might have to commute 45 minutes to work, and that just might each way, and that just is part of the deal. They say, no, that's not part of the deal. There are cities that are accommodating for people who don't want to have to do that, right?
Right, yeah, and I believe that they're a product of their environment, where they grew up, and most of them grew up dependent upon the car, dependent upon mom to take them to soccer practice or whatnot, dependent on the school bus driver to get to school, which is also a drain on city school budgets. But freedom to them didn't mean getting a car and getting a driver's license, because they're getting driver's license and driving less than any generation before them since the advent of the car. And so they're actually looking for cities where they don't have to have a car, and I think it's something like 23% less in terms of getting driver's license. They're not even bothering in a lot of ways, and so they're moving to cities out of school. A lot of them aren't even able to get jobs, but they're moving to cities where they want to live first and then trying to find a job because they're looking for that quality of life.
And there are services popping up around that, right? Zipcar is an example. My daughter's 19. She doesn't have a car, partly because, I'm in journalism. I don't make enough money, but also because she just sort of doesn't feel like she needs it. She gets around. She has a Zipcar account for college. When I was 15 and a half, I remember lying in bed counting the days and thinking about when I get a car, I will drive every day. And to me, that was being an adult.
Right. That was independence.
So it's so cities have to compete for those kids. So in that context, you went out and professionally you started your own firm, right? And what is that, and what does it do?
That company is Space Between Design Studio, and we're an urban planning and landscape architecture firm. And since you've been at Shops of Legacy, we've worked on a number of the phases of that. So that's the type of thing that we worked on. I mean, I moved down here specifically to work on those types of projects because I saw that RTKL was doing Addison Circle and Shops of Legacy, and I was like, that's exactly what I want to do, was do that kind of redevelopment and infill type development.
when we come back after the break. Well, okay. See, Jim's not here. He doesn't. He normally is the traffic cop. So, but I'm going to talk for a minute about the pledge drive, and when we come back, I want to talk about the political side of what you're doing, is sort of the what you're pushing for in terms of trying to make Dallas smarter and more aggressive about the way it transforms itself into a more a smarter urban transportation network. But first. That is my chair. Did you hear that? It is the 30th anniversary of Knon, and we're in the middle of the summer pledge drive. Last week when I was here, that red line was a lot lower, wasn't it? It was way down there. Look at that. It's through efforts through donations from folks like you, the folks who keep Knon going. Looks like they're moving well on their way to their $114,000 goal, but they've got to get there. We've got to get there. So if you enjoy shows like Jim's, if you enjoy people like Patrick coming on to talk to you about these sort of issues, please call in 972-647-1893 and pledge some money. It doesn't matter how much. They'll take anything you can afford. And there are some items that you can be eligible for depending on how much you pledge. If you get a $50 pledge, we'll get you a coffee mug. There's all sorts of shirts for any sort of pledge from $50 to $90. I've got my eye on this somewhere here in my notes. Here it is. There's a Texas Rangers style baseball shirt now that you've added, right? I think that's for a $100 pledge, $125 pledge that you can be eligible for. There is, I want to know what this, for the $50 pledge per shirt, you can get if you want a ladies soft jersey short sleeve Knon shirt, you can get that. Oh yeah, right back there behind me. So call in if you want to hear more of this kind of programming. Please support it. The entire station is run by your donations. When we come back, we'll talk to Patrick more about tearing out a highway.
Till you stop hurting for the sake of finding peace of mind. Rise up from there.
KNON depends on listener support to stay on the air, and now is the time for you to help keep this show on the air. If you like what you're hearing and want to show your appreciation for great community radio, pick up the phone and call to make a pledge. Call 972-647-1893 or go online to knon.org. Don't wait for someone else to do it. Without the support of our listeners, there won't be any community radio on the air in North Texas. So take a few minutes to make a pledge. Call 972-647-1893 or go online to knon.org.
When they're gone for good. This is Scott from KNON's Texas Blues Radio telling you don't miss out on some great blues. KNON's Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 Blues CD. It's a CD put together by real blues fans for real blues fans like you. Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 features great local blues from Michael J. and the Paul Bird Band, JJ and the Detonators, the Chris Watson Band, the Two Tones, Rough Cut Blues Band, Jeff Stone with Charlie Love, Dave Millsap, Sirloin and the Ass Kicking Machine, Tutu Jones, Blues Boy Bo, Buddy Whittington, Andrea Dawson, Kirkland James, Sonny Colley, and Johnny Red and the Roosters. Get a copy now at Forever Young Records in Grand Prairie, Recordtown in Fort Worth, and in Dallas at Bill's Records. This is a Dallas Blues collector's item. A very limited amount of vinyl copies can be found at Forever Young Records, the sponsor of this great blues project. CD downloads are available at cdbaby.com. Whether you get it as a download, on vinyl, or on CD, all the proceeds will benefit KNON. For more info on Texas Blues Radio Volume 5, visit knon.org.
Hello, good morning, my beautiful people. How are you today? Oh, I already know some of you got a headache, but it's the weekend. Sleep in a little longer if you have to get up. Get on up and give us some of that money. Bring it down here if you want to. If your gas is a problem, just call us at 972-647-1893. Check this out, guys. We just got in the real loop. You can put your money and your pledge online. We got this online thing going on, so if you guys can't get down here, you can't call in on the phone, feel free to go to knon.org for all other programs containing to how to give some of your money to your radio station.
Eric Celeste back with Patrick Kennedy on Get Off My Lawn. We're talking about urban planning. We're talking about walkable cities. And I want to go next to talk to Patrick about an effort you've been very involved with over the past 6 months to a year, something like that, which is trying to promote the tearing out of a downtown highway, which has... Well, it's. I'll let you sort of talk about when did you decide that this was something that. When did you have the epiphany? You know what? That portion of the highway, 345 needs to come down. Tell us where it is and how that came about.
Okay, the Highway 345 is the link between 45 and 75. That would be the eastern boundary of downtown, or the downtown loop. It separates downtown from Deep Ellum, and it's probably something that, in broader terms, just highway tear-outs and removals is something I've been thinking about probably since I've been down here. But it never really in specific, like what highway would I tear out until. 2 or 3 years ago, Dallas was going through the Downtown 360 plan, and there was a number of proposed developments as part of that. And I was talking with a friend of mine who's a real estate developer, and we were sort of bemoaning the fact that we didn't think that the plan was addressing the underlying issue, which was that the real estate market in downtown is effectively upside down, and that what we mean by that is saying that the land values or the land costs are too high and demand is too low, so nothing really happens. And we always wonder why is there not enough development? Why is everything surface parking lots? But in reality, surface parking lots almost the highest and best use in a lot of ways.
It's the way the people who own the land can make the most money.
Yeah, they're generating revenue. They're not paying a lot of taxes for that, and so why get rid of it unless somebody's going to come along and build a 40, 60-story tower or something? So they're just holding on to it's a cash cow for them. And so what we felt we had to do was flip that equation and flood the market with land, basically. And so it's almost like a reverse eminent domain, where the city uses a power of condemnation for public good to take land, except we're saying, let's take a failing antiquated structure, which is the highway, and turn it over for private investment for public good. And we set our sights on 345 because it was at the time 38 years old, and elevated highways have about a 40-year lifespan in terms of just the structure holding up.
Before they have to be severely rebuilt.
Okay. And so we said, well, this is perfect timing. The other highways around downtown were already spoken for in terms of some kind of planning and investment was going around it. The Deck Park was being built. And there's the Horseshoe was already in planning stages, which is now under construction for the other portions of downtown highway. And there was literally nothing happening around 345. If you go there today, you see mostly derelict land and vacant property and parking lots. And so we said, well, this would be perfect. Let's just have a little fun and let's draw a boundary around every vacant piece of land or surface parking lot and call that underdeveloped land that we can reposition by turning that right-of-way of the highway over to create new blocks, basically reconnect the street grid that used to be there, although it's a little different now because of the DART track, so we had to do a little bit of playing around, so it's not exactly like the grid that used to be there. But when you look at old city maps and whatnot, you see how the downtown blends into the neighborhoods surrounding it, and our study area basically encapsulated 54 city blocks. And we always ask, if we wouldn't tear out that kind of neighborhood now to build a highway, why would we not think about restoring it by taking the highway away?
Because something, tell me if I'm wrong here, something that's fundamental about the idea of walkability is it doesn't take much of a barrier to segment areas and to make it a place where people don't want to walk through, and it just becomes a hindrance, right?
Yeah, I mean, even though you can physically walk under, and I do it all the time to go to Deep Ellum because they're better bars and restaurants.
Right,
We're both
downtown.
downtown residents.
Right.
Neither of us have a lawn to get off of either, so that's kind of funny. But yeah, people don't like walking beneath a highway just because it feels unpleasant. But then there's the spin-off effect in terms of it becomes parking lot. So you don't want to walk through a parking lot, even though it may be only a quarter-mile walk or a 5-block walk. It feels much longer if you're just walking through pavement, especially on an August day.
Right. And I used to work at the Dallas Observer old offices on Commerce, the old KLF building, for the folks who remember that. And that was, when we go to lunch, there were a lot of lunch places in Deep Ellum. We would never end up walking over to Deep Ellum, though, even though it was basically the same distance as walking into downtown to try to find lunch. And I never realized until I started reading some of your posts about tearing this highway down that symbolic divide really sort of it affected the way we operated day to day downtown.
Right.
So what sort of, let's first of all, let's hold that thought for a second, because I think we've got a caller who wants to talk about some of these connectivity issues and for all parts of town. Tony, let's go to Tony on line 4. Tony, are you there?
How y'all doing this morning?
Doing well. Thanks for calling.
All right. I mean, the two places y'all mentioned were Legacy and the Addison Suburb, which are north of town.
Right.
Yep.
You know, and for some reason, those developments don't come to the southern part of town and have that kind of connectivity as far as where DART is going. And it seems as though, when corporate America tries to design a community, it only does it for a certain segment. Taiwan Park is a beautiful park that they made. They got the money, they raised it. But you will not see something like that going across the Trinity that connects Oak Cliff to downtown. And as an urban planner, how do you get around, or how do you develop a plan where, okay, how can we have something that benefits all communities? Because when you go to D.C., you see people walking, running everywhere. You go to L.A., same way. But here, what we have is, and no one really want to talk about it in a sense, is that the tracks, now I use that as a reference point, and not necessarily, as degrading. There's a north-south divide, and when it comes to developing Dallas, and one of the things you're talking about right now is, I've heard in another city they're taking up highways, old highways, and demolishing them. But those same highways cut through the community that divided the black community. Anyway, I mean, St. Thomas area is one of those places that, if you're not from Dallas, you wouldn't know that was a black community that was cut off by urban planners,
right,
who were trying to get suburban whites to have commute back to the city core.
That's
and
right.
I'll just offer up for any other information you provide.
Tony, thank you so much for the call.
Thank you.
That is a great point he brings up. These developments go where the money is. I mean, that's what developers care about, right? So talk about how you get that same sort of organic development that helps bind a city in the southern area.
Yeah, it's hard. And there's a certain amount of inertia built into the market. And people would always used to say, well, development's never going to cross 75 to East Dallas, but then eventually it did, just because it sort of ran out of land in North Dallas, or north of Dallas, but not far North Dallas. But eventually it did, just because the market's always going to be looking for opportunities, which is how to make cheaper land into something more valuable. I've been disappointed in how much or how little investment's been going towards the southern sector. And when people ask me about how 345 would help the southern sector,
the tear out of 345
would help the southern sector. I always point to that this is about bringing investment not all the way to the south yet, but it's about redirecting it, so it's not keep going further and further north, because the highways basically say, well, you can keep going to the edge, right? The market keeps going further away, and we're basically subsidizing getting away from Dallas.
Right.
So we're trying to turn that back around inward. And by bringing it to near East Dallas, which is where 345 is, that would help sort of bring the market back towards the south, even though it's not quite there yet. I think the next step would then be, just like the market eventually jumped 75 to build like around Henderson and Greenville and those areas.
Right.
Eventually
Which is very
it'll head
different.
towards South Dallas afterwards. But I don't think the market's ready to make that risk yet in terms of just how developers think.
And tell me if I'm wrong. In my mind, it's basically, you've had, 40, 50 years of development moving northward, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it takes a while, but you're starting to see that. I think it generates from downtown, right? You look at what's happening a little bit now with the Trinity development over in West Dallas, and you look at the Cedars area, and then you look at the areas in North Oak Cliff,
Mm-hmm.
right? Bishop Arts, and those pockets start to connect.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. And now you see, for example, what they're trying to do on Jefferson with redeveloping that and making that street, which has great bones, as everybody says, right? Through Oak Cliff, making that a much more walkable area with more access to public transportation.
Yeah, it'll be like the main street of Oak Cliff, just like it once was.
And those sort of developments, I think it takes time, and and it's understandable that there's frustration for how long it takes.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm encouraged, starting to see that slow roll from downtown, some development southward.
Yeah, and that's the market responding to demographics, just like things like a zip car popping up. It's because people, the younger generation doesn't want cars, so then when there's a market response, which is like zip car, and this is the same in terms of housing coming back towards the city, because more people want that walkable urban lifestyle, except I consider a lot of the infrastructure, particularly the highway infrastructure, to be the barrier sort of holding back that huge pent-up demand. And so you see places like Uptown, and what State Thomas has become is incredibly expensive. A lot of the units and buildings aren't worth, the premium people are paying for it. But that's because there's so few opportunities to live in walkable neighborhoods. Yet 40% of the country, according to surveys, want that type of lifestyle, but only 3% of the country actually do. And then when you look at millennials, 77% of them want that, but so few can afford it. So a lot of this is about creating more supply of walkable neighborhoods, which would effectively bring the price down and have more of a variety of product types that could fit into these neighborhoods that more people can afford to live in and not have to have a car, because that's sort of an induced expense on households.
Let's go back to the phones. We have the great Wiley H. has called in. Wiley H., are you there?
I am. Good morning.
Good morning. Great to hear your Bane voice this morning.
I've been a big fan of Patrick's for a long time, and I'm very happy to see that he's on the show this morning. I had a couple questions. I'll give you the first one first, and if you have time after that one for me to throw in my other one, delighted to do that as well. But the first question is, you talked about the obstacles in redeveloping downtown Dallas and the high cost of land. And I agree with that. I also see another issue, which is what I perceive to be the chronic under-assessment of underutilized land in the CBD. So if you're a property owner, it's very easy to hold on to a piece of underdeveloped property for many years because your property taxes are so low.
Yep.
And if those properties were assessed at the correct value, there would be a much greater incentive for these owners to say, gee, I got to take this property and either develop it myself or sell it to somebody else because I can't afford the carrying costs.
That's
what do you think?
That's a great point. Deep Element really suffered from this. There's one company that owned a lot of the land there, and I know people who tried to buy property there and wanted to renovate it and put in new restaurants, shops, other types of things, and they just said no. It was not in their financial interest to sell it because because of just what you said. What do you think, Patrick?
There's a couple things you can do, and one thing that my hometown of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania did was actually set up a split tax, which is sort of a land value tax where they decoupled improvements from land, and I actually tax land at a higher rate than they would tax improvements rather than putting them together and then taxing the whole thing. And that has led to quite a bit of reinvestment because it creates an incentive for people to do more with their land. I floated that idea to some people before, but everybody just sort of goes, I don't know if that's legal here or not. It's only some states it's sort of written in where they're allowed into their constitution where they're allowed to do that. Whether that's possible here, I don't know. I throw that idea out every once in a while. I'm not a huge believer, and maybe this is Texas rubbing off on me, that I'm not a huge believer in using policy to do that just because the politics of it might just be too difficult. That's one of the reasons what led us to 345, the highway tear out, was that exact issue, that we wouldn't be able to somehow create another incentive to develop. So we would just do it through changing the infrastructure around to be more supportive of walkable infill development.
So Wiley, I want to hear Wiley H. I want to hear your next question, but can you hang on and we'll get that on the other side?
I can.
And because also we're going to put you on hold, and you're going to talk to the great Jenny Peel, because I know you want to donate at least $30 to this sort of quality programming, and I know you've got the money. So we're going to put you on hold. Again, for folks out there who want to call in and talk to Jenny, give some money to help support community radio like this. You only hear these sort of issues discussed at length. I mean, one of the reasons I enjoy doing this show, we joke about it, but we do it for free. It's because it's because I really hate going on television and talking about these sort of issues where you get a minute or two to say something. Here you can do an hour on a topic like this, and it's really important to get deep into these sort of city issues. 972-647-1893. If you want to continue to hear great programming like they give here every day of the week, please call in, donate what you can, and we'll be back on the other side in a couple minutes.
If I never have another hit for the rest of my life.
If it's time to get rid of your old gas guzzler, the KNON Vehicle Donation Program can help. There's still a market for those old vehicles, and if you donate it, you're helping to support quality programming here on KNON. Just call 877-KNON-AUTO or go online to knon.org. We'll take care of everything from pickup to tax paperwork. That's 877-KNON-AUTO or online at knon.org.
The Sons of Herman Lost Disc Airmen Disc Golf Association and the Gas Pipe present the first annual KNON Disc Golf Tournament and After Party on Saturday, September the 7th. The tournament will be held at B.B. Owens Park, located at 10700 Kingsley Road in Dallas, beginning at 4 p.m. There will be goodie bags, games, an ace-hole contest, poker run, and more. Then, beginning at 7 p.m., the party starts at the Sons of Herman Hall, located at 3414 Elm Street in Deep Ellum, with free food and live music by Texas Slim, Jay Johnson, and All Lit Up. To register, contact me, Hippie Bobby Wilbanks, at 972-658-8577 or go to knon.org. Participants of the disc golf tournament admitted free into the after party. But if you just want to go down to the show, you can get tickets at knon.org. That's the first annual KNON Disc Golf Tournament and After Party on September the 7th at B.B. Owens Park, and the after party with Texas Slim, Jay Johnson, All Lit Up, and free dinner at the Sons of Herman Hall, presented by the Sons of Herman Hall, Lost Disc Airmen Disc Golf Association, and the Gas Pipe. This is a KNON benefit event.
But while we down here, y'all, we need some of your money. KNON.org. If you're on the internet, 972-647-1893. If you want to call in, we like your money, and you know what? Your money is good here.
Eric Celeste with Patrick Kennedy. I'm filling in for Jim Schutze this week for Get Off My Lawn. Jim will be back next week. Tell us all sorts of tales about what sort of undercover work he did this week.
You still owe me a beer, by the way.
I do owe you a beer. We can get that after this. Is it going to be noon? So let's talk. Wiley H., are you still on the line?
I'm still here.
Great. Go ahead with your next question.
Okay, sure. You guys talked a few minutes ago about State Thomas, and I think you were talking about Uptown as kind of becoming, very successful examples and where land values are escalating. And, I see that those areas are becoming, in a bit, victims of their own success or have the potential to. What I've been hearing about lately a lot are some proposed developments coming down the pike that are proposing substantially greater densities than are allowed under current zoning, and some land uses that might be incompatible. And so I'm wondering, is the City of Dallas Planning Department up to the task now, as we're starting to have these kind of high-class problems of enforcing limitations on density and continuing to regulate kind of the uses to ensure that you don't have kind of the thing doesn't kind of collapse on itself?
Well, what about that? Density is a huge part of everything you talk about, right? The importance of it, and so talk about the regulating of that.
Well, one thing about density is that it also, you get to a certain point where it stops being beneficial. Density is tax based and it buys amenity and all that, and but after you see the statistics, and after 40 or 50 units an acre, it starts to tail off in terms of the benefits, and then it starts to have some negative outcomes as well.
So you need to be crowded, just not too crowded.
We don't want to crowd it. I always say that density should be a response to demand, right? It should be desirability. And, a lot of people want to be near nice things like Katy Trail and Turtle Creek and whatnot. So you're seeing a lot of this new towers come up.
And it's a circle, right, Bill? Because those nice things are there, more people come in, and then more development comes in to chase the dollars of more people, right?
And at some point it might just become that people don't want to be there anymore, and so they'll look for an area of the city that may be slightly less dense, may have different or better or more unique amenities and restaurants and stuff. That's why I think Deep Ellum has so much potential right now, because it has more character. It's one of the few places that actually has a real, I think, authentic character that's a byproduct of an outgrowth of Dallas and who Dallas citizens are.
And a real history and a real multicultural heritage, right?
And the thing about actually regulating density is interesting, because Dallas has zoning to some extent, and we like to make fun of Houston for not having zoning, but we don't really. Everything ends up becoming a negotiation anyway. And
we have zoning unless someone has enough money to change the zoning.
Well, yeah. So right. Any development doesn't really go by the zoning anyway. It creates a new planned development district, or it's within an existing one, and all those are really just copy and paste jobs of previous PDs or planned development districts with minor changes for the specifics of location. So it's going to be a challenge, and I think that's where density wants to be near desirable places. Like, one thing I worry about is there's a lot of problems in terms of parking around areas like Greenville and Bishop Arts, because they're areas that are built to be neighborhood centers, but because they're so rare, people are traveling from all over the Metroplex to go to the restaurants in those little walkable historic streetcar neighborhoods, and it becomes incompatible. And then there's going to be this pull for higher density residential to be near those places too, and some people may want that and some people may not. That's another issue with the whole point behind 345, is to create an outlet for all that density to go in a place where it's more compatible to big buildings, which are already there in terms of downtown and the employment base between downtown and Baylor.
Let's take a step back and talk about highways. My thinking on highways has changed a lot in 10 years, and as I've become more aware of the sort of things I think you've written a lot about, and the stuff that you point to. Because
you lived in Atlanta for a while and saw how awful they are.
How awful it is. And I lived in Atlanta without a car, which was great, and I was able to do it. But you can do that when you plan on going into a city, and you plan your life around transportation options, etc. It's hard to retrofit your life if it's highly dependent on a car. So, but the highways, when you talk about, that seems to be, especially in Dallas, you look at the Trinity River plan, so much of that was about building more highways, right? Trying to lighten the load of the Mixmaster. And the idea is you build more highways because we got more cars on them, and that will solve our problems. That's faulty thinking, though?
It
Why
never,
is that?
It has never really worked except for in smaller cities. It's the only time that adding highway capacity has really sort of relieved congestion. And in bigger cities, it just creates more and more congestion, and it gets more and more expensive.
It fills the capacity.
Yeah, and so after immediately 40% of the capacity, the new capacity, ends up getting filled up, and then I think something like after 10 years, all that new capacity that was built ends up filling up too. So it's what we call induced demand, that because you've created this reason to drive, people drive, right? And so the real estate market responds, and everything gets further and further and further apart. So then you have to drive more. There's a study out of University of Toronto where they found that it's a 1-to-1 relationship between highway capacity and vehicle miles traveled. So over a 20-year span, if a city doubles its amount of highway lane miles, the citizens will be driving double the amount that they were 20 years ago. And so the only way to really combat congestion, in my opinion, is to actually get people out of cars, and that means actually reducing highway capacity.
To me, the best example from my life is Highway 75. When I moved to East Dallas 25 years ago or whatever it was, before the 75 expansion, when it was just a couple lanes, when they expanded, I remember the first day it was open, and I was so excited because it's wide open. I can get from Richardson to downtown, no problem. Well, today it's a nightmare, and it doesn't help. So tearing out 345, why is that good for Dallas, and what are the major what are the major obstacles that you've run into?
Well, we believe it's a win-win-win-win on a number of levels. That TxDOT loses a cost burden. They're coming back with feasibility study and 9 options that would have a variety of costs, and we don't know what the costs are yet.
TxDOT is the Texas Department of Transportation.
Okay. Yes, and TxDOT would lose a cost burden to maintain that road, which has no more economic benefit to it, just keeping it. I mean, the only benefit is safety and keeping it from falling down at this point. So the land would go over to the state if this were to be successful. The state would presumably generate revenue from the land sales. The city would get the new density and the tax base that would come with that. And then both Deep Ellum and downtown businesses would have potentially 25,000 new people living between them that would populate the restaurants and all those things. And then in terms for the citizens get obviously more tax base that would be coming in, and less burden for them as taxpayers as well. Plus more opportunities to live in some place that may be more interesting than the typical conventional suburb where everything looks the exact same and every restaurant's the exact same.
And so some of what's the pushback you've run into? Surprisingly,
very little. I think everybody we've met with and all the stakeholder groups that we've met with have been very supportive. We're only asking for supporting the option in the study in terms of other priorities besides just moving cars, because if the priority is moving 160,000 cars through a single corridor, nothing's going to do that as well as a highway, and even those don't do it that well, because if you look at it any time during rush hour, it's standstill. So we're saying, why don't we explore this idea and how much economic development and what kind of impact it can have in terms of quality of life, increased opportunity, and reducing the dependence on the car.
When I was in Atlanta, there was a huge transportation bill that was a issue that was voted on and voted down by the voters there, and that's because it's mostly suburban folks there. And if you think Texas can lean a little to the right sometimes, go to Georgia sometime. You'll be shocked. So I was shocked at how many people equated smart growth initiatives like highway tear-outs, like more public transportation dollars, to this sort of Agenda 21 nut job idea that, you're trying to take my car away. You're trying to impose this socialist style of urban planning on me, which is just insane. But I see that. Do you encounter any of that? And not obviously not with the groups who understand it, but in terms of people attacking this idea in general?
Right. No, I think that probably stems from just a fear of change in general. And it's a hilarious notion just because when you actually think about it, the creation of the highways was both imposed right, from top down, and they're fundamentally socialist if you think about it. And so what we're trying to do is actually pretty conservative to the core in terms of is providing more choice of both transportation and housing options in the marketplace, rather than just being this narrow choice of you have one type of house in one location and it's further out on the edge, and the highways are free and subsidized. So we're saying, well, let's reverse that course. So it's where the tax base actually can support the infrastructure, because right now, the highways were great to build when it was all federal money, but that well is dried up. TxDOT's out of money, and the cities obviously don't have money to maintain these things. So it's about building the right balance between density and tax base with infrastructure while maximizing mobility. And the thing about highways is that they're fundamentally anti-urban, and trying to address congestion by creating more highway capacity. It fights the inherent nature of the city, which is about bringing people together.
Right.
You know, that's what the city is. It's a reactor for social and economic exchange. And
you're going around doing sort of the dog and pony show right now that you have to do, which is you're going and meeting with groups that are, real estate groups, influential political groups, people who can carry the water for this.
But also neighborhood groups, because we want support of the people too. And so we were trying to build enough of support on a broad level that we can take that sort of up the chain to political level.
Do you see the light go on when you're talking to these folks? I mean, do you see them go, oh, that's why it makes sense to take out a highway? It affects all these other things.
I've seen many people go through the 5 stages of grief in a 30-minute conversation, and by the end they're like, yeah, that makes sense. Because at first they're like, well, I use that every day.
Right. I go down I-30 west and I head up to 75 and I loop around, and it's a beautiful shot of downtown when I loop around, even though I shouldn't be looking at it. Why would you take it out?
Right. Yeah. And so we're actually saying your life probably get better, and so would the functionality of the city would get better, because you look at what the highway actually does to the city streets. The north-south corridors are this convoluted mess of spaghetti that nobody can figure out. When you look at like Pearl and Cesar Chavez, these north-south connectors, we think that by taking out the highway, we could actually improve those connections between 75 and Woodall Rogers, then to the south to 30. By having 3 or 4 or 5 of these north-south boulevards that actually have development on them and addressing them that will actually allow for pedestrians to exist in the same right-of-way as cars too.
There's a thought, I know in covering some of the Trinity River stuff, the bond election, that there are groups that are kind of make their money by promoting highways and the building of, et cetera, right? So, I mean, there are some built-in forces that you need to work against, aren't there?
Yeah, and that's why we've approached this from an entirely economic standpoint, saying, if instead of building a highway or maintaining a highway for X cost and presumably and usually very little Y return on investment, we're saying this, instead of costing $100 million or $1 billion to build some new highway or interchange, let's just take the demolition portion of that, which is a fraction, like a tenth. In the case of 345, it would be about $60 million, and we would actually leverage about $4 billion in investment, or in terms of just property tax revenue for the city, it would be $110 million a year, where right now it's getting $3 million a year out of that area that we're looking at.
Let's, as we wrap up, let's talk about Dallas, the future of Dallas. People ask me all the time, we and you do this too, you live downtown, we have to fight sort of the perception that downtown is dead, while at the same time saying we do need more services, we need more things here. And I try to extrapolate that, right? Is it possible that in 10 years, 20 years, there can be the sort of connectivity that makes it feel makes me feel, I just got back from San Francisco a couple weeks ago, right? One of the reasons that city is so great is because you can walk most places, there's public transportation for anywhere you need to go. How close are we? Is it possible for Dallas to get there in 10 or 20 years?
San Francisco also removed 2 highways from their downtown, and they're talking about further extending the Embarcadero another 14 blocks where they pulled it out, and now found that there was 300% increase in property values in the area. in terms of what the future of Dallas is, we have to be proactive instead of reactive. And that's thinking about what is the city in 2040? What is the most beautiful city that Dallas could be in 2050? Is it in highways? I don't think so. So we have to start thinking about what it is in 2050. And when people start saying, oh, that would change my life now, it's like, well, don't think about, because this is so long term. Anytime you're talking about big infrastructure, you're talking about, in the case of highways, it's a 40-year commitment, basically. So if we're going to rebuild that highway as a highway, then we're probably going to be stuck with it, till 2050. So what does Dallas look like in 2050? Is it entirely car dependent? And I'm not sure that that's a way for the future to way for the city to actually exist in the future in a meaningful way. So,
Patrick Kennedy, thanks so much for talking to folks today about this. Let's do some plugs. You've got a website people can go to right to hear specifically about this issue.
anewdallas.com, which we are pursuing 501c3 nonprofit status to promote a broader range of redevelopment and transportation equity issues in and around downtown and Dallas in general.
And that's ANEW Dallas.com.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your blog, which you can get to through either Car Free and Big D
or Walkable DFW.
Or WalkableDFW.com. If you're on Twitter, you can follow him at WalkableDFW on Twitter. And as he's going and talking to these groups and making presentations and trying to get this tear out option considered, he'll keep you updated on that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, thanks so much for being here today. Let's talk. It is once again the 30th anniversary of Knon. It's a great time. Now, if you've enjoyed this last hour of discussion, these are important issues to Dallas. If you want to hear more of these sort of things, please call in. Your money makes it possible. 972-647-1893. And you can talk to Jenny Peel. You can talk to the folks at the next show. And please do your best. Let's try and show Jim how this is done so that when he comes back next week, he's shocked at how much money we've raised without him. Thanks so much. Jim Schutze will be back next week with Get Off My Lawn. This is Eric Celeste with Patrick Kennedy.
KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to KNON.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.